Awesome. And Mark, I am super excited to share your story, but also give you a chance to just kind of share your experience in our program, talk about your diabetes, your own journey before and after. Before we get into the program specifics, though, I would love to let our people watching know a little bit about you. Like how long have you had diabetes? Are you MDI, pump, all that kind of stuff?
Perfect. So I'm a type 2 diabetic since 2009, which I managed through diet and medication until about 2019, at which point, actually from a medical incident, I had to go on insulin. And that's when I got a CGM, thank God. And I'm doing multiple daily injections. And I know for a lot of people, type 1, that a lot of them are on pumps, but the MDI, like the pump, has its pluses and minuses, right? And it has to be managed a little differently. So I didn't get a lot of good education. In fact, very poor education from my endocrinologist about my diabetes. He's, checks all the blood sugars and A1Cs and stuff, but not a lot of information about time and range and a whole bunch of strategies around your insulin and all of that. And so I was very frustrated by that. And as I got onto insulin, I realized I got to manage this much more strategically than I have when I was on oral meds. And I wanted to avoid lows. I had a few lows my first few times, and it's very scary. So I started looking on, also I got an A1C. Usually my A1Cs were good, seven something. But then I got one that was almost 8 in December of 2020. And I finally said, enough is enough. I need to get some help. And I started looking on YouTube, which seems to be a popular place to do a lot of things. And found your videos and loved the way you explained things. Also, you had a lot of videos, so covering a lot of different topics. And I started to go, wow, this guy could be, if he's the real deal, this could be really a good thing for me. And that's when I decided to do the call with you, and based on the call, went into the program. And on the call with you, I had 4 things that I said I really wanted to do as part of the program. One was to get my lows to not happen so often. I wasn't sleeping well. Every time I woke up in the night, I checked my sugar. And of course, that starts to wake you up. And it's not an uncommon story for people that are learning to manage their diabetes, but it's frightening, and sleep is very important, obviously. So that was one of them. Second is I wanted my A1C lower than 7. Then I wanted to get my time in range, which I was averaging around 70% to 80% or better. And most importantly, I wanted to flip feeling like diabetes was managing me into feeling like I was managing my diabetes. Because my normal way of managing things, I'd let my sugar go high whenever I get into an unknown or unusual situation to protect from going low. But of course, that raises your average sugar. It gets your time and range messed up, and you're just not being strategic enough. So those were the big objectives that I sort of set with you when I decided to go into the program.
That's right. Yeah, and I know that we had that initial chat and had some back and forth on whether or not it would be a perfect fit, since we specialize with type 1s. And you're like, well, type 2, but insulin dependent. And we both decided that it was a good opportunity for me to spend extra time making sure that it works with you as a type 2 is insulin dependent. And I mean, right out of the gates, you blew the doors off the hinges. It's like incredible watching you, maximize time and range and everything. So really exciting to see you as someone just trailblazing for the type 2 world, insulin dependent, and assuring that the formula works across the board. And that was just so fun to see. I'm curious, like if there was a main struggle being insulin dependent at that point, what was the main struggle with your diabetes management before you worked with us?
Well, I would say there was more than one struggle. There were several. One is obviously going low at night. And one of the things that's great is you have a very structured way and very data-driven way to figure out a whole bunch of variables without it becoming overwhelming in terms of your ability to manage it. And one of those variables was your basal insulin or your long-acting insulin. And going through the very structured way you have of testing that, I realized my basal was too high. Mm-hmm. And it was a major reason that I was waking up with low sugar. And so as soon as I got that figured out to the right level, and as you've said, it's different for everybody. I mean, that's the other thing that I like about the program is you're not trying to say, everybody do this and everybody will get the same result. That doesn't work that way.
Right.
But I started to sleep better, and that was a huge thing. And so that was one of my 4 goals, right? Is to be able to not have as many lows. So the second was I wanted to increase my time in range. And that really gets into not only the right basal level, but the right bolus and short acting levels. And again, you've got a whole series of things in the program that get you to figure out what's your insulin to carb ratio, how should you pre-bolus, and that depends really on what you're eating and where you are in your sugars at the time. I mean, all these things that nobody ever really explained to me. And also how different foods and food types can affect your sugar levels and how quickly they go up. So paying attention to all that, figuring out my insulin to carb ratio, also figuring out my carbs, right, very carefully. My time in range went from 70%. It's now for the last 30 days in the 90s. And I just crossed over 80 for the past 90 days. And remember that a lot of that I wasn't in the program yet, right? Mm-hmm. So that was a second major objective that I wanted to meet that I feel very, very good about. And then my A1C is definitely coming down. I just got my results. It's at 6.8 now. Mm-hmm. It was in the high 7s, but it's going down. I mean, I can tell on the CGM that over the last 30 days, it's more in the mid to low 6s. Mm-hmm. So all those variables getting figured out, really just a big change for me.
That's incredible. I think I have to take a second to dissect the multiple wins you just said. So the A1C dropped almost a full percentage point, and that's still including before the program numbers. So we know, like you said, it's probably mid to low 6s by now, which is 1.5 points, which is nuts. And then time in range, can't gloss over that one. You said your 30-day average is in the 90s percentages. Is that correct?
Correct.
Holy cow. And then your 90-day you mentioned was mid 80s. Is that right? And then
it's in the low 80s.
Low 80s.
But it's going to start crossing into the mid to high 80s because obviously it lags.
Right. We got time before the program included in that as well. Yeah.
Right.
My goodness, that's incredible. So it sounds like about a 20% increase in time in range since the beginning of the program. And yeah, the point to maybe 1.5 drop in A1C. That's incredible. And that's honestly a testament to your work, Mark. Like, you put the work in, you know better than most, it's not a magic pill. Like, there is no magic pill, and you put that effort in. So I just want to say I'm proud of you for putting that work in. That's incredible.
Oh, thank you. I'm proud of you for doing such a good job teaching. But I would also say, it doesn't end with that. Now I'm really working on tightening the range of my sugars, which is a longer process. And I would say the program works. Multiple daily injections is definitely different. I mean, and I'm curious whether you agree with this or not, but with the pump, you have great control, because it's got so many adjustments. At the same time, there's a lot of a learning curve to using a pump properly. Mm-hmm. And with MDI, you have really good control in terms of knowing how much you put into yourself, but you don't have the constant little adjustments.
Right.
And so you've got to learn how to manage those sugars and know what's going to happen better, which is another key thing that you work on, is being able to strategically say, okay, if I'm going to do this and my sugar is here and I'm about to go do that, what's that going to do to my sugar?
Mm-hmm.
And I have gotten much better at that. I'm not great at it yet, but I'm much better at it. And so it definitely can work with insulin dependent multiple daily injection type 2 people. And I would say if anybody is even thinking about it and uncertain what to do, they should do the phone call and just chat with you, because it makes a big difference to figure out if there's a good fit. And as you said, it's a lot of work, particularly in the beginning, but there's big payoff if you do that.
Love that. Yeah, it's not easy, but it's pretty simple and straightforward as far as what to do. So yeah, and I'm curious too, was there a moment going through the program that you noticed it was working for you?
The two biggest things were, one, when I figured out my basal rate, right? And that stabilized a lot. And then understanding better how to pre-bolus and my actual level of bolusing through carb counting and knowing my insulin to carb ratios, I just started eating and noticing, oh my God, I'm not getting these fluctuations like I was. And if I was getting them, I had the tools to figure out, oh, wait, you had a meal that was high in fat and you shouldn't have pre-bolused as early as you did, or whatever. And so all those things have really helped me start to figure out that getting better range and time in range, right? So, and again, Matt, there's a lot of little tips and tricks. I wasn't a big fan of like Zoom calls in the beginning with everyone on it, but I've turned into really enjoying hearing what other people are going through and hearing something where you go, I just went through that. And then the advice you can get either from the person going through it or from you saying, well, have you thought about this? This is what I would do. One piece of advice, for example, you said, which for me is definitely true. Managing lows is easier than managing when you get too high. And I started to go, you're right, I've got to be less afraid of it, holding insulin, dosing enough to get my insulin level at a reasonable range, because I can manage a low, I just got to pay attention. And obviously you don't want a low, but I mean, it's a lot easier than if you hit 220 and you're trying to bring it down.
Yeah, and stacking insulin and range bolusing.
Well, and another thing that would help me a lot was when you indicated, because I said, look, my correction factor of what how much I can lower my sugar levels based on a dose of insulin, it's not the same when I'm at 110 as it is when I'm at 200.
Right.
And you said, yeah, that's correct. It's going to be worse. At 200, you're going to need more insulin because your body has already got too much sugar in it, or glucose. So those kinds of things were just big, big helps for me.
I love hearing that.
So I can't, you can't say this one thing, and you've said this, there is not one thing that's going to fix this. It is a series of learnings and tools and some discipline that will get you to a point where, and this is my fourth goal, that you feel like you're managing your diabetes and your diabetes is not managing you. And I've still got things where I've got to feel more that way, but I feel like 80% more in that direction than I did beforehand. So very grateful. You have been a great teacher. You're patient with people. And you're big on rewarding people, congratulating people when they get to a victory. And then tons of tips and tricks, which are great.
I love that. And I mean, yeah, it's more of a fun environment when we get to celebrate our wins with each other. So I think that's just fun for everyone, myself included. I love hearing about everyone winning and time in range and A1C. And I had pizza, all this fun stuff. So it's been a blast sharing those wins with you guys. But I'm curious so like data, obviously we're huge on data analysis.
Right.
science side of things, but on a feelings side of things, how do you feel now that diabetes is a bit more certain, a bit more streamlined?
I'm not worrying about it as much, right? I mean, I was checking my sugar constantly before, and I'm also don't worry as much about if I see something, I can often go, you know what, the insulin hasn't fully hit yet. Don't worry about it. Just let it go. And I would also say, and you talked about this quite a bit, and you just had a video on this. You can't react emotionally when something doesn't go right. And there's such a tendency to want to do that because you're a little panicked. And you can't get too panicked because if you have the tools and you have the knowledge, then just think it through and figure out, well, wait a minute, what should I do now? And that's really important because anyone that is insulin dependent knows, like if you hit a low, you just want to start eating the kitchen. But it's only going to make you start on the roller coaster. So,
Right.
And I've been on that enough. And so that's another big thing is I have far fewer of the roller coasters than I did before. And those always were very frustrating. So it's been really good. And another one is the exercise, right? How to measure what's going to happen when you do exercise and knowing what to do before you go out and either do aerobic or an anaerobic exercise, you know what's going to happen to your blood sugar. So that's another big plus.
Absolutely. My bike ride yesterday was that same story. So it's super helpful to be able to do that. And I'm glad that you found that valuable as well. I'm curious that, and you've kind of hinted at this already, but even just talking about, getting on the call initially with us and, obviously we had a great chat about strategies moving forward. Will it work for a type 2 insulin dependent? Let's just jump into this and see how it goes. And just the incredible results that you've been able to pull. But looking back at where you were before the program, the person you were, the struggles you're going through, what would you tell someone who's in that spot, has not joined, still looking for the next steps of, what they can do for their diabetes?
I think my first thing would be you have to be at a point where you're ready to make some changes. And if you're not ready to make changes, there is no point in trying to go into a program that's asking you to make changes, right? And to look differently at your diabetes. But if you're frustrated about it and you're not happy with where you're at and you want to improve your health and well-being, then you should be looking at this program because it's going to help you on all those fronts, right? You're going to have less frustration over your diabetes. You're going to feel better about your health. You're going to know that you have the tools to be able to manage things. Because look, I might be in the 90s, but my blood sugar is not, right? I mean, it still does stuff and you go, really? But I now have much better knowledge about what to do. And if you're not in the program and you're worried about those things, make the call. I mean, that's all you got to do. And you'll find out from the call, does it make sense to you or not? And I think you're very good on the call to say, hey, if you are not ready, you can't expect to succeed in the program. But if you are ready, you had a video on, you were in Hawaii, I think. You were talking about a bush that they had cut back.
Right.
And that's sort of like diabetes in the sense that things happen to you but look at the new growth that comes and all that. And I think I told you my corollary to that is sometimes you got to cut yourself. You got to cut off the old habits. You got to get rid of things that you were doing that weren't working right, and be willing to be a little vulnerable in the beginning while you're learning how to do something different. But the reward from that is huge. And so if you're willing to make those changes, then, make the call and just check it out.
Love that. And yeah, I remember, Mark, when you told me about, pruning yourself, essentially cutting off the bad habits. I was like, dang it, that would have been so good to add to that episode. If I had said that, that was a fantastic distinction. Just I appreciate you sharing that with me, because that's a great way of looking at it too. You know, cutting off the bad habits enables you to grow and become the next best version of yourself. That's fantastic. I would love to give you an opportunity just to kind of share, if it's okay, one last question for you. Any golden nuggets that stuck out to you from the program, or even if it's like an epiphany you had while going through it, that if you could share that with us.
I think a number of them have come out. Well, another nugget is looking now at my diet, and I've talked to you about this, you know, you cut back on carbs, but all of a sudden you realize you're eating a ton of fat. And I'm going to be looking at trying to get more carbs into my diet, because I think I'm not actually doing enough, even though everyone says carbs. No, you got to be careful. If you're managing it right, you can make changes like that. So that's going to be a follow-on. And also, I've got to be willing going forward to recognize that things may change, and what worked before may not work under different circumstances. And so I got to be willing to test again and say, well, wait a minute, maybe my basal rate needs to change again. Maybe it doesn't. Or maybe I should recheck my insulin to carb ratio right now, because it doesn't seem to be quite doing what I thought it was going to do. And so I think a big nugget is when the program ends, it doesn't end, right? You got to keep working at this. This is a lifelong thing. And so, but I'm not afraid to do that. And I now know what I need to do to be able to figure those things out. And if I get really bad, I'll call you again and I'll say, Matt, you got to help me here.
There you go. Very cool.
And again, my main advice is, you know, well, first, thank you, because I really have appreciated the program and the way you manage it. And by the way, you know, the workbook and all that stuff is very helpful. And all the videos, and the Facebook community and stuff like that. There's just a lot of resources that the program brings. And so if you don't like learning one way, there's plenty of ways to learn through this program. And thank you for all the advice and help, because it's been awesome.
Absolutely. It really is my pleasure, Mark. I thoroughly enjoy hanging out with you guys, but also just seeing the constant and never-ending improvement that you guys are all achieving and pursuing every week. It's fantastic to see how far you've come. And yeah, you've done an incredible job. I know you're going to hit that 90% on a 90-day average. You're already on track for that. It's amazing to see that happening, especially coming from where you were beforehand and just how fast you've learned. So again, I got to say, I'm proud of the work that you put in. I'm proud of you, and very excited to see these results that you've been able to accomplish. It's awesome.
Awesome. Thank you, man. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Mark. And for everybody else watching, obviously we do coaching, and there are different variations of videos on YouTube that Mark found us through, and you guys can check those out. There are literally hundreds of videos that we've put out over the years, but there is one specific video that is, I believe, where Mark found out that we do coaching and how he got on the call. So if you're curious about how to find out about that, and you want to check out that free training that talks about basal, bolus, activity, food, all that fun stuff, head over to diabetesinaction.com. And at the end of that video, that's where the opportunity to sign up for a call with us is going to be. So check that out. Mark, thank you so much for spending time with us here today, sharing your story, and cannot wait to see how much further you take this thing. It's going to be awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Absolutely. Thanks, guys. Been an amazing day. Keep up the fight.